Hello! Upcrate has sent me another box. This is number 44 from April 2023. I had no idea what was in here, so let's get into it! So Upcrate has been sending me random boxes from their back catalogue, which is why I'm not opening the most recent one. But I am also receiving these for free, so I can't complain too much about that. And because they're in Germany, it always takes ages for the boxes to arrive in Australia, so I don't think I'd receive the current one on time anyway. Let's get it open. All the art supplies are packaged beautifully, but it looks like the end of it has been sliced open. Now, I don't know if this just happens, or if border security magically got inside the box, but I guess we'll never know. There's some art supplies, 3 sheets of paper here, and this looks to be watercolour paper. It's very thick and sturdy like watercolour paper. Each subscription box also has Bottle Post, which is the monthly magazine, and I'll just push that box out of the way. There's also a sticker sheet by this month's featured artist Ludwig. I hope I pronounced that right. And a voucher for HelloFresh in German, so I guess that one's not going to be very useful here. That's the bottom of the box. There is also a print which got stuck to the back of the magazine. I really love this print by Ludwig. The colour palette is lovely. So is this what I'm going to find in the box? I guess we're about to find this out now, but I just thought I'd show you a little bit about Ludwig on the back here. Her name is Claudia. And I think she is the first artist that Upcrate ever featured in their first box. But let's get back to the actual art supplies. So we saw those 3 sheets of paper, and now for the main event, the mystery package. I was going to rip it here, and then I remembered that it's ripped on the side so I could just dump everything out. Look at that, it's the whole way across, which makes me think that someone cut that open. But whatever, I have my little conspiracy theories. And I'll just pull everything out and I'll go through it one by one. There's also a whole tin in here. This was the most intriguing thing, and I was just having a look inside the paper to make sure there was nothing else stuck inside the folds. No, it looks all clear, so I can move that out of the way. I usually keep the paper wrapping for scraps. The little plastic doohickey came off this paintbrush, but it is a very tiny paintbrush and it has a solitary hair sticking out there, so I think I ended up trimming it a little bit. And what else have we got? A dual-ended metallic pen from Spectrum Noir in red garnet. It was quite a struggle to get the lids off that. That's a really lovely brush tip on that side, and then the other's got more of a bullet tip. That's a pretty colour pen. I like that one very much. Then there's this black Fude-looking pen. I think it's from Tombow. Also dual-ended, and this side is grey. I did not even realise this when I was actually looking at the pen right now. I found that out later when I swatched it. And there are 3 alcohol markers by the company Art Space, a really nice looking brush tip on that, and a chisel tip on the other side. So many companies are starting to make these brush tip markers. It's really great because they are definitely the best. 3 pretty looking colours there in pastel tones, and the most interesting one, this tin, which has turned out to be a whole watercolour set with 12 colours in it. I'm really shocked by that. In my experience with previous boxes, normally there's maybe 1 or 2 tubes of watercolour paint if they're going to include that, but to have a whole tin with 12 half pens is pretty awesome. I was just touching them to see if they were tacky, only just a little bit, but you could probably see here that the colours are completely out of order, and I'll have to fix that up. But here are all the art supplies that were in the box, along with this lovely print. It's one of my favourites that I've seen. A few stickers, and then the Bottle Post magazine. I might just flip through this because they do send it to me, so it's only fair that I flip through their magazine properly. And what I like about this magazine is that it includes all of the supplies with a write-up on them, and often other products you can get in the range. First was the Tombow pen, and now I'm looking at the markers. There are the 3 colours, pastel violet, yellow and rose. I still can't get over the fact that there was a whole pocket watercolour set in there. I really like that, I think it's cool. We'll see what the paints are actually like in a little while. There's this little line brush in a size 0, and yes, we do indeed have some watercolour paper. Saunders Waterford 300 GSM high white hot pressed cotton paper. Saunders Waterford is some excellent paper and I do use it quite often. There's also a write-up on Ludwig, who is the featured artist as I mentioned before, some more of her artworks, and I do really like her style. The colour palette's very appealing. I also really like this monochromatic piece. It's quite subdued, that particular picture. There are the stickers and some of her other sketches. And then we move on to a different artist who's actually using the supplies out of the box to give you some sort of idea of what you can make. So there's a step-by-step project to do to create this figure drawing using the markers and the watercolours as well. Here's another artist that they've featured, the Sailor of the Month. And then going over here, this is a useful page showing all of the mixes you can make with the watercolours and the markers as well. Really good for colour theory. It looks like they've used the black and grey Fude pen in the background there. And then onto the Upcrate battle, which was from the prompt in box 42. I think that's meant to be February 2023. And people can enter in their artwork, I think, to the Instagram page. But here we go. This box is Upcrate battle, which has already been and gone. And the topic is thinking about the future. And in true Becky fashion, I immediately forgot about the prompt once again. But I'm just going to do a quick little swatch to see what the colours actually are. And this is where I gave the brush a tiny little haircut to get rid of that one stray hair. But the colours have no names. There were only numbers on the bottom of the half pans, but otherwise I could not find any information about these. So I found this little off-cut piece of paper and I'm just swatching the colours quickly so I could see what they actually are, because the dark ones are really hard to distinguish, and then I can put them into logical order. I had a little bit of space left on this piece of paper, so I figured I'd just swatch everything out really quickly, and I'm using that Tombow pen first. So one side is black, and then I discovered right here that it's actually grey. That's really cool. I like that it's got two tones. Next up is the Spectrum Noir in that garnet red. It's a metallic pen, but didn't really show up too metallic on the paper, although it's very opaque, which is great. And last up are the three marker pens, using those wonderful brush nibs. All three of them are lovely. So I stamped out a quick little swatch sheet so I can test out these colours properly. I made a mess of it, but never mind. And now I've put them into a logical colour order. It's much better now. I really wish they had names. I mean, I could come up with my own names, I guess, but for this I just painted them out. Okay, let's see. We've got lemon yellow, a warm gamboge yellow, the next one is a yellow ochre, and then this one I'm going to call maybe English red or something like that. It was quite an opaque brown. We've got this lovely bright scarlet colour red, and next to it is a much pinker magenta. It's a little bit hard to see it on the camera, but that top row is looking pretty good with the colour range that they had. Next up, I'm guessing this one is phthalo green yellow shade, and the one next to it is almost identical. I'm going to call this one a phthalo green blue shade. It's kind of weird that they've got both of those greens in there. They're so close to each other. This one has to be phthalo blue. There's no doubt about that. And then I would say ultramarine blue, which are two very standard blues that you get in a lot of intro sets. And then this has got to be dioxazine purple. And last up is a very opaque lamp black. Not a bad palette overall, except maybe for those two very similar greens. But let's move on to my first artwork. On one of my recent walks, I saw this lovely Tudor-esque house with early plum blossoms blooming. Spring is starting to make itself known. But I snapped a picture on the phone and decided for some reason that I was going to draw it today. Buildings are so difficult. Why did I have to choose this one first? I don't know. But this pastel violet marker pen had got me thinking of those plum blossoms. I think they're plum blossoms anyway. And I thought this would be fun to use to draw in the actual blossoms. I'm drawing them in first before I do anything else because I didn't want to lose all of the background. I also added in some of that rose marker as well. And now I'm going over the outline of the house and I'll add in some more detail as I go. There wasn't a pencil in this month's box, so I just used one out of my own stash because there's no way I was trying to draw this straight off in pen. I'm not that good. So I drew most of the Tudor house in with the black, but I found that the grey was quite useful for the lighter areas, and I coloured in the parts where the sun was hitting it with the grey side, just to get a bit of value difference in the house itself. Trying very carefully to draw around the blossoms that I'd put there. Marker pens aren't that great on hot pressed watercolour paper. They tend to soak in a bit too much and go a bit flat and monotonous, but I did my best with what I had here and I was able to get something in the end. Although that tree is pretty dodgy, I'm hopeless at drawing trees, even more than buildings, I think. They just never look right for some reason. I also used the marker pens to colour in the brick area. That rose colour was far too pink, but once I added on the yellow, it mixed in quite well and I got this fairly decent brick colour. Now I'm painting some water onto the background and going in with the watercolours, the phthalo blue for the sky, which I'd watered down so it's not too bright, and then I had to mix up some lighter greens because I've only got the 2 phthalo greens. But I had enough yellows in the set to be able to make some different variations. I also mixed in black as well to get shadows. I mixed up a dark brown for the roof, and overall the watercolours behaved perfectly fine. I'm not sure that I'd class them as professional quality necessarily, but they are definitely of a high grade student quality, and there were no issues with chalkiness or anything like that. It's really difficult to know when there's just no information on this company. They do have kind of a website, but there just wasn't much on there. So if you know anything about Artspace, please let me know. All I know is that they seem to be a company from Cyprus, which is interesting. It said Cyprus on the tin's label at any rate. It's odd that I didn't see them in Greece, if that's the case. Perhaps they make these products specifically for Upcrate? I have no idea, it's another unsolved mystery. But anyway, I kept working on this house, adding in shadows, trying to make it look a bit more realistic. I'm actually not too unhappy with how this turned out. I initially thought it was a bit of a disaster, but it actually came out okay, and that metallic pen came in handy to make the blossoms look a bit better, because by now the ink had just merged in with the watercolour and wasn't looking super great, but I went over with a bit more of the marker pen just to try and blend it into the background. It's difficult because it's really transparent. I needed opaque supplies to make a better looking blossom. I'm using a white paint pen that came from a previous Upcrate box just to finish it off and make it look a bit better, adding in a few more details, and I'm pretty much done with this one. The tree's a bit dodgy, but I actually like how the Tudor house came out, and overall I'm quite happy with this one. It would be fun to paint those blossoms in gouache though, and here's the final scan. Now I'm going on to my second picture. The camera decided to focus on my hand instead of the page, so it's a bit blurry to begin with. It will come right soon though. I'm attempting to draw this really cute picture of a Maine Coon cat, but I was having one of those days where I just can't draw at all, like it just would not come together. The pencil drawing of this is an absolute mess, and I'm looking at it going, oh my gosh, am I going to have to ditch this piece of paper and start again? But I just kept scribbling away at it. I think it was actually the pencil that was throwing me off for some reason. I just couldn't get the proportions right and it looks so bad. I had to keep rubbing things out and redrawing it in. After a while, I just got really sick of the pencil and decided to ditch it altogether and just go in with the pen. Because technically speaking, the pencil wasn't included in the box, nor was it needed eraser, but I rubbed off most of the graphite, and I'm using the grey side of the pen to draw in the lines, and it turned out actually really well. I'm surprised with this one because I really thought I'd stuffed it up to the point that it was never going to look like the picture. But once I'd drawn it with the grey pen, it just looked so much better. And I took my time to get in some of the markings on the cat's face because I will be painting this in a while. But it was around this point where I felt a lot better and the face was actually starting to look correct. Because I really like the expression on the Maine Coon's face than the way its head's tilted, and I wanted to capture that in the drawing. I think this grey side of the pen was my absolute favourite thing in the whole box. I rubbed off the rest of my graphite and now I'm painting in with some light washes of colour. It had some interesting yellow markings around its snout area and then a lot of brown as well as some green for its eyes. In the previous painting I'd actually used a bigger brush, but in this one I used the brush that came in the set. It's so fine, and really it's not particularly useful for much other than fine details. If you want to paint larger areas, forget it. The brush kept drying out really quickly and I had to keep dipping it in water. It was a bit of a frustrating exercise, but admittedly the brush worked well for the finer details of the cat's face and all of its markings. I think the grey pen lines give the picture a much softer look than the black lines would have. So I think I'll be using grey line art a bit more often in my artworks. Now I've got a really good pen to do that. And I spent some time painting in some general fur detail because a lot of the cat's mane is actually white, but there are subtle colour variations within that. And then the rest of the cat is a darker grey kind of colour, so I mixed up the black, also some of the brown and the blue, to get a nice soft grey colour. I was able to achieve a lot of colour mixes from this little set. I'm quite impressed with it, and I think this was a really great addition to the box. I'm always a sucker for watercolours, and I really love them when they come in metal tins because I use those all the time. I'm just adding in a little bit of the black pen around its face and to colour in the pupils of its eyes so that they stand out a bit more. The grey was just not quite dark enough. And then I drew in a yellow circle behind the cat with the yellow marker pen just to give it a bit more interest because the background was looking a bit stark. And I think this really finished the whole picture off. I'm so happy with how this one turned out. The yellow looks really great against the colours of the cat, and it's just a fairly simple colour palette that I used in the end. A tiny bit of white for highlights because I wanted to show some whiskers, and I'm finished. Of the 3 pictures that I've done today, this is easily my most favourite one. It was also the most difficult to draw, and therefore the most rewarding once I'd finished it. I think that will be great as a print. What do you reckon? Last picture, because I said there were 3. At this point, I just could not think of anything else to draw, and so I just started ruling in some random squares on this page, thinking that I might do some sort of abstract. They're not very straight, unfortunately, because I didn't measure everything, and I was never very good at graphic design at school. It's far too mathematical for my liking. I made some of the boxes overlap each other, and then I just drew lines to make a bunch of Tetris-looking shapes over the whole page. And I thought for this one I'd use the marker pens because I hadn't really featured them that much, and I'd drawn in the squares with the grey liner again. I was really enjoying that one. I think this is kind of inspired from that Dutch artist Piet Mondrian, and he did a lot of coloured squares and abstracts like this. I don't often do abstract art, but I do enjoy it occasionally, especially when I'm just not feeling inspired from reference photos or anything like that from life. I just want to do something that's totally out of my head, and for some of the squares where they're overlapping, I did actually overlap the colours, just to get a bit more variation in colour palette on here, because I've only got 3 markers and 2 of them are quite similar to each other, the rose and the violet. I do like that yellow pen, I think that was my favourite out of the 3. But all of them worked well, and I used the brush side for the most part. I find the chisel side is usually more difficult to use and to get a smooth layer that isn't streaky. I mean, you can see I'm making some streaks here, but when I went over it a few times, that tended to blend out quite nicely, and I think the whole thing ended up being quite smooth without too many streaks. This piece was really relaxing to do, and I didn't have the pressure of trying to draw something. I also like to use all 3 pieces of loose paper when it comes to subscription boxes, so I don't have them lying around everywhere. I figure 3 artworks on 3 papers is a good way to showcase all of the art supplies in the various different paintings and drawings. You can see I'm layering those colours over each other to get that orangey sort of colour between the yellow and the rose, and then I used this metallic garnet pen to fill in those last 2 squares just to add in a bit of variety. It didn't look very metallic, I'm afraid. I think it had sunk a lot into the paper, so I think this would be better on a less porous marker paper or something like that. But the colour worked well enough, and it went together nicely with the other colours on this palette. So I decided that the grey lines had just completely disappeared and I wanted to make them stand out. I'm going over everything with the black side of the Fude pen, and this just really brought the whole lot together. Now, I enjoyed doing this, but I felt like the whole thing was just a bit boring with the squares, so I wanted to add something else to it, and I figured I would use the stickers from the sheet and stick them on. I started off with the goat and then got a bit sticker happy putting all the other ones on, although I decided I didn't like the eye, so I took that one off and moved the lady over here. It needed something else, it was really unbalanced, so I wrote in a quote. This is by Pablo Picasso, who was also an abstract artist. "Inspiration exists, but it has to find you working." And that's so true for me, because I really have to push through these videos in order to get something. I can't just wait for the inspiration to hit me all the time. It's pretty tough being a YouTube artist and having to put out regular content, which means making regular art. I'm not always inspired, and so I really have to work through that. I have to just start drawing something and hope that it's going to turn into a picture that I like. This one was a perfect example of that, where I had no idea what to do. I just started drawing squares, and then I ended up with this whole artwork. I actually really like it. I'm going to put it in my junk journal because I think it's turned out really pretty. And yeah, it was a bit of fun. It's also a good way to use up the stickers that were in the box, and it ended up being something that I never would have thought of otherwise. I just started working and the inspiration eventually came. Thank goodness, otherwise I'd have nothing, and we'd be looking at a blank screen. But here are all 3 artworks that I achieved from the supplies in the box, and here they are just to remind you. I really enjoyed this box, number 44, and all of the art supplies were great, no problems with any of them. I will link Upcrate's website in the description below, and there's also a little coupon code for your first order, I think, and it's a 30% off, so you just have to type in the code there, which I will also have in the description. I've been enjoying these boxes, all the ones that I've tried, and they're definitely worth checking out if you want to get some mystery art supplies for yourself. So a huge thank you to Upcrate for sending me another box. I've really enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and you might want to click that subscribe button for more videos. I've got a couple more Upcrate boxes for you to look at here, and I will see you all again really soon in my next video. Swatch you later. Bye!